Do you know what you should do? If I were you, the one they've just done for Peter, they did 2 books in a case. As I said, it designed
Peter
by
Lindbergh,
yeah, and they did one of his books called, The Untold Stories, which is just his photographs, right? And then another book is called Raw Beauty, and the Raw Beauty book is just about 16 people who wrote a double-page spread on him, and wrote it, and then put it together. And then there were 3 on my bit. It was a spread like that, and then on the left-hand side was a picture of me working with Peter, just on a shoot. Someone took a snap, and then turned it over, and there were 2 snaps just off the shoot. So just him shooting, and then him shooting.
What, is that a private book, or is that on sale?
It's currently only on sale in Coruña, but they're going to try and get Taschen to make it into a thing so people can buy it. But they're all like, I'm the least famous person in there by a long way. So you've got Naomi Campbell writes about him, Kate Moss, Fabian Baron, Paolo Reversi writes about him. They all get a spread. Everyone gets a spread and then 2 photographs, right? I didn't know this. I just sent in they said, will you write something about him? But what you should do is about David. Because I think one of the things there are 2 people in my life who've died that I really think about, not often but enough to sort of, in a way that other people, outside of my parents like stuff. One is David Abbott and the other one is Robert Louis Dreyfus at Adidas. Because they were both, Robert Louis Dreyfus
Is
died...
he dead as well, Robert Louis?
Yeah, he died of leukemia. And he died relatively early, I mean like in his early 60s. And he was really... He was fundamental to us keeping the business and having it for 10 years. Amazing. He did it. And then David, because there was something really weird about the obituary he got. And he got an obituary in the Daily Telegraph. And at the end of it, after the obituary, there were only 2 bits of work they picked on to say that's why he's getting an obituary. One was J.R. Hartley, and the other one was a Volvo poster with cotton wool or something like that. Right, so that's all they've noted. And I thought... That is really weird. That's not basically what David Abbott was in our business. It wasn't about those 2 bits of work. They may have been fine, but he was a lot more than that, and he always was. Even as a kid, I used to walk past Doyle Dane and look up and think, David Abbott works in there, and Dawson Yeoman works in there. All these people that were like gods to me, And all of that, he was that kind of person, and he always was. He was a gilded boy. There's no doubt about that. But he earned it. You know what I mean? He actually did something for it.
Yeah.
So what they did for Peter is a way of doing a book without having to write it. But you could just take.
Well, that's what I was going to do. I'd done quite a lot of work on it, divided it into the sections, and and started to plot it out and layouts and put all the work. I found different bits and pieces. Tried to put like a jigsaw puzzle. But lots of things happen that. It's hard, you really need your energy. You need to be in that. Right, I'm going to buy 1,500 copies. I mean, madness, really.
I think you should just get 10 people to write about him. That's what I would do. Just get 10 people to write about him and make that the thing. Make it containable.
On what?
On David.
But based on
his work.
No, but on a... Because ideally what you want is there's 2 things. There's what people think, and then there's his Volkswagen stuff. His economist. What I like doing is putting stuff out, because then it gets shared all over the internet.
You want to see it. No, everyone wants to see it.
But what I'm saying is, if it said, so I got Richard to do Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
In theory, I could get someone to do economist, someone to do. It doesn't mean you only have to talk about the. I don't know. I'm just trying to think how you get that work out there.
I think the Economist. Yeah, all the ones that he's. To me, in a funny kind of way, just mentioning Economist, you think, that's a more modern David than Volkswagen and whatever, because it was later and it was more about, had presence. And was more about it was a writerly thing. It was only writing and read, you know what I mean? It was, so that's more him. But what I'm saying is, you could easily find, for instance, you would find someone from the old Doyle Dane to write about him at Doyle Dane, and that could be Volkswagen, or it could be Remington, or the other guys, because he was writing some of that stuff then. He was creative director at Doyle Dane. He wasn't just a senior writer. So it's easy for someone to write. I mean, and if Richard's already written on Sainsbury's...
On one of the clients.
Yeah, that's fine.
Maybe divide it up, the client,
exactly,
into other people.
That's a good idea.
Because then you can just get all the work out, and then it's all shared. And
I don't know, have you ever done a podcast before?
No.
Have you never? What a square.
No, but I've done interviews.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But I would do whatever you want, and I'll just talk.
I'm just downloading those so that you get a chance to just squeeze through them before we start. So I'll just flick through these just to remind you.
That was... Yeah,
I don't know what order they come out. That was it? Oh, okay.
Because the Marshalls did quite a lot of these, not the ones at the beginning, because we did them. That was Steve and me, Grand Tour thing, promotion. Yeah, that was me and Steve, I think. That was Giles Montgomery. Doesn't every woman? I don't know. I never liked them.
What?
That look.
Didn't you, that one?
No, I didn't like that. That was Marshall's. Yeah, that's when they used to go on, get the drift. You know what I mean? They'd go on too long.
Yeah.
That was Steve and
like
me.
That one.
Steve and I, yeah.
It's one of my favourites.
That was more. I think Steve wrote that one by the nibs. Yeah, he loved all that stuff. You know, he was much better than me at all the little mini puns. You know, that was Marshall's. I don't know who did that one. But what I was into was Harrods suggest. I always made people say, you've got to say Harrods suggest, or Harrods think you should, or might be. You know what I mean? I think that might have been.
Well, we'll talk about
that. Was Downley Mobile. That was Steve and I. We did that one. Oh yeah, that was Steve and I. See, 6 of the best. How the other half gives. That was Steve and I. Yeah, that was great. That one coming down. Yeah, I love that one. That was Stephen. Oh, that was the Marshalls. Late night Wednesday. Oh, this is what got us the Timberland account.
Oh, was it?
They opened a store in Harrods, and so we said to Meg Gilmore, who was our client there, who was the client at Timberland? We'd love to work because Timberland used to do really cool ads in the States.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And
Mullen ones.
No, the ones before them. They were done at Ali Gargano.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, and they so we got to know the guys, and you know the fantastic story. When we met them, Rod and the other guy, the New Zealand, Australian and New Zealander, we went to see them. They were in a flat in Notting Hill, and all the stock was in their flat. All the Timberland boots.
What, they were a franchise over here?
Yeah, they bought the license to sell it in the UK.
They were in one little place.
Yeah, and they had all the boots in their flat. Right, there were 2 boys from New Zealand and Australia who knew each other and were, they owned a.
Was that the first place they were in Harrods in this country?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, really?
And then, so we kept talking to them. We said, come on, we want to do some ad, we'll do them. And in the end, the story of Timberland is incredible. And where it ends up, you go an arc from when we first did it, from that would have been late 80s.
Yeah.
All the way through to the end when we built them they went from that flat to a huge Worth house and an office outside Terminal 4. Big, modern, everything, fucking gone through the roof, vertical. Couldn't make enough of the boots, right? Sydney Schwartz came to see me and said, we can't tell you what you've done for us and everything, blah, blah. It's so big, I'm going to go into clothing, and all this sort of stuff. And then so it must have been around 92-3 when it went off the boil because they put someone in from BBDO. They hired an account man from BBDO to be the head of marketing, and he didn't like us being in London and doing whatever. I also, at the same time, had taken Tom McGallagher up to see the family. So we met in New York. No, we met in Boston, Tom and I, drove up to see the family in New Hampshire. And I said, look, you want me to do the work in the US. Yeah. I think we shouldn't do it. You should do it with Tom, who's just started an agency. Tom is the best writer in the US. He will do it, but he'll work with us. So I took them this proposal. Yeah. And they didn't understand it. They couldn't understand why.
But why they'd have 2 agencies?
Well, why I would not take the money and do it for them because they wanted me to do it, right? And so Jeff Schwartz, who was his son, who was only about 18 at the time, he took me to the kitchen and he said, my dad doesn't understand what he's doing here. I said, he's the best fucking writer in the US. What do you think? Anyway, this is around the time we got Adidas. So after a while, this account man and them fucking around, I just said, listen, tell you what, you deal with it. You want to do what this account man wants, fine, you live with it. So, cut to 2011 or 2012, they come back in and say, we're in deep shit. We're a public company. Jeff is now president, quite young, 38, and we're yellow boots, black south side, leisure wear, and some outdoor shit. Right, but we're all over the place, and the share price is tanking. Yeah. So we go in there and we say, right, you are an outdoor company, and that's it, full stop. You're just the great outdoors. We did the video for them. That's what you are. Don't fuck about. This is how you do it. We won the pitch. 3 years later, I get a note. I'll send you the note. It's a staggering note. And it's from Jeff. And he says, funny thing happened today. We sold the company for $1.2 billion. So
He sent you a note with a cheque in it, or
nothing. No, because everyone said, why didn't you have shares in it? I said, well, because we couldn't have shares. We were being paid. We need the money. Agencies can't have shares in the things they do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they don't get paid. The only way they can't pay people to sit at their desk and write ads or help do account management or planning with shares.
Yeah.
Whatever happens if the shares go the wrong way? We can't gamble like that with our clients. We've got faith, but it's not all in our hands. But the story is incredible. And the letter just says, we would have done nothing without this. And he was right to praise me because I didn't know what I was doing. And it was me single-handedly saying, we're going in that direction. That's what we're going to do. This is what the ads are going to do. We're going to do. And we did them, right? And they did exactly what we told them to do. And then 3 years later, over a thing, even though there were people in the company fighting us because they didn't like the fact, as ever, that we had so much sway over the owners, I sat on the board of Timberland, on the main brand council board of the company for like 2 years. Again, which other people hated because they couldn't stand the idea of an outsider above that wasn't even them. They weren't allowed in, but Tim was in this thing.
It's a shame in a way that you don't get more. We don't get more. You know, when you do things like that you get your hourly rates.
But everyone's always said this. So everyone's always said, how do you get paid for the real value you deliver? It's not in the fact that you've got awareness figures. It's how you change businesses. Look at Dom Perrignon, for instance. Dom Perrignon was on the floor in Costco, like literally spilled out in America. You know, fizzy, whatever. No one knew what it was. It was expensive, fizzy. What the fuck's that? You know, whatever. So they come to us and they say, "Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do that?" And we start thinking about it, and then we work it all out, and we get to the point where we say it's all about power. It's displays of power. So if you come into Zuma on a Friday night, you go to the table with all your hedge fund boys and you say, right, champagne, great. The next table comes in and says, right, let's have champagne, let's have some Bolly, vintage Bolly, right. The next table comes in and says, champagne, well, Dom, only Dom, right? So which one's the most powerful out of them? Which one's the top dog? Who's the alpha male? The guy with the Dom, right? So, and Margaret said it, you can't drive your Ferrari into Zuma, but you can order Dom Perrignon, right? And we did that for them. We shaped the whole fucking thing. We did the campaign, everything. We had, and what we said to them, you've got to have two people that come together to make it. You have a director and you have a photographer. So we had like Tarantino as a director and we had a photographer. So it was quite early on, before people started doing all this shit. And they said, we love it, great, because it's LVMH. So they took it away. And I got a call and said, can you come over to meet the person under, what's his name, Arnaud, a woman? And she said, yeah, we think it's a fantastic idea, great, but we're going to do it. What do you mean you're going to do it? We're going to execute it. Karl Lagerfeld's going to shoot it. Really? Have you seen his photographs? She said, excusez-moi, you know, all that kind of shit. Bernard is a personal friend of his. I said, fine, all right, you do it. And then the photographs come out with Helen Christensen. They're the worst photographs I've ever seen in my life. But the genius thing was they used Karl Lagerfeld as a kind of fashionista god with parties in Tokyo, London and New York. Built the whole thing, and then Dom goes from being, what the fuck is it, to woof, right at the centre of fashion culture. And it was a stroke of genius on their part, I have to say. But we changed it. It was a strategy.
Did the relationship continue once they said we're going to execute it?
They were friendly and gave us other pictures, but nothing within LVMH. But we didn't.
They just took that.
They just said we're doing it.
Right. I'm going to try and bring some order to this.
Yeah, go on then.
Because we're bouncing all over the place. Yeah. So we're going to talk about Harrods, but primarily about premium brands. Yeah. Because I've been in the business quite a while now. You probably think of me as a child, but. And there's not many people who do premium very well at advertising. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned that example of Paul Smith, and I don't know if he's ever been in CU, but there's talk that he regularly does the rounds of agencies that are supposed to be good. He'll talk to them, they'll show some stuff, and he'll just think they don't get it. Because I presume that often, you know, it goes to a younger department who are trying to push things that are a little bit crass, a little bit too idea-y. You know, it'd be lots of ice sculptures and it's really cool prices or cool. You're just slightly not picking up the sophisticated vibe. So he's never had an ad agency, although he's looked and been in many. Have you ever met him, seen him?
The only time I met Paul Smith was when I bought some trousers or bought a suit from him and the trousers need to be fixed. The agency was in Covent Garden and he brought them round to me when he'd fixed them.
Oh, really?
But he never came into the agency.
But never as a client, okay.
But I understand completely why he wouldn't choose an agency.
Yeah.
Because I think agencies conceptualise fashion and put ideas. It's not just that the people are unable to have ideas. They have ideas. But the ideas are not what fashion needs. Ideas need the colour, the vision, the sensibility of the brand, which is not an advertising idea. The idea is the brand in fashion. The idea is Paul Smith and his vision for coloured socks or coloured lining. That's the idea. They don't want an idea on top of it because that gets in the way.
But in the two worlds, you've got these sort of ideas that get in the way, and then you've got those brands that are a vibe, let's say, whereas lots of things that you've done as an agency seem to sit in the middle. It's not just, we'll get X to shoot the pictures, and you're not pushing a sort of slightly crass concept-y thing. It seems to be the sensibility, but with some communication in it.
I think it all comes down to whether you're interested in the consumer of the communication. If you understand what people want from the communication, you don't foist an idea on them. You stand back and say, okay, they do want, if it's a premiumized brand, they do want a certain gloss, a certain sheen on the presentation. They do want, however, some substance there as well. But that's way before you jump to an advertising idea.
Yeah.
You don't need that. What I look for is something to do with the authenticity of the brand, and then something which gives substance to the relationship between the brand and the end consumer. So that usually gives rise to some intelligent thought, not necessarily an advertising classic idea. So, for instance, people may look at some of the work we do for premium brands or premiumizing brands and say, yeah, that's not award-winning, but I don't care about that. Yeah. I care about the fact that it makes a connection, and it makes a connection for the reasons you've said.
So, growing up, I've got a little theory on this. So, I wasn't a rich kid growing up, and you didn't seem to be a little rich kid growing up. And I wonder whether that's helpful when you're working on premium brands, if you're interested in that, because you're sort of looking in rather than in the middle of it. So you're observing perhaps their behaviours and they're picking up on their clues. I would think that's possibly true of me. So there's lots of things that really appealed to me growing up that would never be something I would buy, but I would be very aware of Paco Rabanne ads and this kind of slightly exotic world that I wasn't part of. And I wonder whether it sounds counterintuitive, but if you don't come from that background, you've got more chance of picking up on those cues or not. I mean, so for example, when you were growing up, what premium brands were you aware of or attracted to, if any? Can you remember any?
Yeah, I can. I can remember America was a big part of my youth, just learning to look at the world outside and wondering what was special about it. I think, though, it's more to do with, and probably what we share, is being curious, and being curious about how the world works and what things and why are those things beyond me, and what is it, and constantly thinking about brands without calling them brands, just like it could be anything. It could be at the top of our road. I lived on a council estate just outside London in a council house. And at the top of our road was just a road that went straight across. But every now and then, if I was sitting there waiting for the bus or standing there, two Porsches would pass each other. I didn't know what they were until later, but they would wave or beep when they passed. And I asked someone later, Porsche drivers, who are quite rare then, obviously, that's what they do. That's how they acknowledge each other. So little things like that. Plus then when I started going to, when I picked up on American music quite early, because I'm one of a big family, so my brothers ahead of me were into American, all the Elvis coming out, Eddie Cochran, the Platters, Royal Orbison, all this stuff was happening in our family all the time, burgeoning, like literally taking over the family. And then going to work very early, I would buy magazines, which I couldn't afford, like Life magazine, Look magazine, and then I would just read.
Before advertising, was it?
Before I was just a messenger then, and so I was spending money which I didn't have on magazines.
So why were you buying I used to do the same, but why were you buying magazines then?
Because they were American. They were American magazines. And
but what did they have in there that compelled you to keep spending your money?
There was an entire...
A world you wanted to be part of?
Yeah, a totally different world. And it was a world which was, if not luxurious, it was very well off. It was definitely, you had the big car ads in there and the big things, and then you'd have a Volkswagen ad. And those things, I started to bump into them and think how clever they were and things like that. And then later on there'd be Avis ads in there. And I'd look at them and notice them. They were noticeably different than everything else. But I wasn't reading the articles. Occasionally I'd read an article. But I would be on the train from Baker Street to Chorley Wood, where I lived then.
And did you have a notion of getting into advertising at that point?
I was 15. I got into advertising when I was 3 or 4 weeks after my 15th birthday.
As a messenger?
As a messenger.
And where was that?
That was at Rex Publicity.
Right.
In Mayfair.
So you hadn't considered being a writer necessarily, or had you?
Nothing like that.
But you were just attracted to the ads and the way they worked?
For some reason. Maybe I thought because I was in advertising I should look at them or whatever. I don't know.
So go on, name some brands, premium brands that had an effect on you pre you writing ads, if you can think of any.
I remember going from... The first agency I worked at was in Chesterfield Gardens off Curzon Street.
Yeah.
So I walked from there up to Green Park Station, and near Green Park Station was the Jaguar showroom, and I used to stand at the window and look at a white E-Type. They had a white E-Type there. As a kind of it was just sat there, and it was just so beautiful and amazing. I didn't even know why it was beautiful. I mean, it was never I was going to afford it. I wasn't thinking one day I'll own you. It wasn't that. It was just the lines of it just looked amazing, and that would be a brand that I would sort of understand is like way ahead of me, but still something I could appreciate just looking at it. So that's one. There weren't many, because I don't think if you don't get, I was getting paid nothing. The family were not well off, and therefore, I wasn't looking to sort of aspire.
Well, so for example, I remembered recently that I used to get Tatler when I was living in a council house as a young child, virtually. And I remember someone saying, it's ridiculous that you get that, which it is in one way, but I was sort of I wasn't interested in whether, Lord Fauntleroy was going to this party or that party, just that general vibe and world. It was like so exotic and different. So what about, for example, Harrods, because we're going to get on to talk. So what was your awareness of that? Because obviously, for me growing up, there would be certain things that would be the premium top things. There'd be Savoy's the best hotel, Lobbs are the best shoemakers, Harrods is the best shop. There'd be that sort of thing. Did you ever go into Harrods or have a vision of what that was?
I'd never been to Harrods, except that around the early 20s, I started dating a Portuguese girl who I only found out later was very wealthy because she was a waitress, and I picked her up as a waitress. And then we started living together, and she used to go to Harrods because she had money in the back, which I didn't realise. So she'd buy her vegetables at Harrods, and I'd say, what on earth are you doing that for? How ridiculous. But at the same time, I then went to work from when I went to PKL, quite young, about 23. Right. And PKL had the Harrods account, and we were in Sloane Street first, and then Hans Crescent second. And that was right next to Harrods. So in a way, we were literally on the doorstep of Harrods. So even though I would, castigate this girl for going to buy her tomatoes at Harrods, it became somewhere where I wouldn't go and buy my stuff there, but at least I knew about it, and I would wander through it in wonder like anyone else would do, but also saw it more as a place that sold things rather than just some big emporium that I went past on a bus.
Yeah.
It went from being like this big castle, golden castle, to a place which I was more used to going into.
There might be some things that you want to pick up there. Yeah. So was Harrods the first ever premium brand you worked on? So you worked on that at PKL, which was Papert, Koenig,
and
Lewis.
Yeah.
Was that the first upmarket premium thing.
Yeah, it was.
It was.
Yeah.
So, and how old would you have been at the time?
22 or 3.
22. So now it's unlikely you would give someone 22 a premium brand, isn't it? You certainly wouldn't give someone
No.
at 22.
No, but I think it was to do with the time, and also to do with the agency at the time. There were 4 teams, and we were all kind of equal. I mean, Peter Mayle and then David Ashwell, and then myself and Phil Mason, John Kelly and Paul Walter, and then Mike Doyle and John Horton. So those are the 8 people. And then one day Peter came in and said, "We're firing half of you." And so I stayed, and Paul Walter stayed, and David stayed, and then the other 4 got the bullet, because Peter wanted to fire most of the clients. But Harrods stayed,
Right.
and we continued to work on Harrods. But we were still very young. We're still only 24 or something like that. But the point you're making about age was less to do with how old we were, with the fact that we were helped to understand what we were doing. We could write ads about Harrods. I mean, I remember one of the first ads I did was an ad which had Nino Cerruti, who died recently,
Yeah,
and it just
yeah.
had a little
Seen that
tag,
ad, yeah.
had a little tag next to him, a Harrods tag, and it just
Yeah, we'll
said
include that.
another Harrods exclusive, which I thought was a cute
Yeah.
little thing, because we couldn't show a suit, because that wasn't the issue.
Yeah.
It was the fact that they did. So they told us and briefed us on that, and though we did an ad on it, and that was fine. That was a Harrods ad. We had a sense, we did know kind of what we were trying to do, which was talk. I came up with a phrase later, which was nose in the air, doors wide open. That was that's the way we did it for Harrods all the way through. So you always wrote things with a kind of an attitude of being posh, but also allowing people to get to you. Accessibility was part of it as well.
How did you make it accessible? I get the posh thing.
I think by not pretending to be posh. So we wrote ads with a kind of common touch in a way, even though they were written in a semi-arch way. Like Harrods suggests you do this, or may we say that, or and much of the long copy ads was written in this style, which wasn't arch. It was just written in such a way that we recognised that you could put a £75,000 chess set in the same ad as a £9 bread.
Do you think, I'm just trying to think back to that time, so you're 22 when you're working on that. Is that the time when, with that sort of 60s revolution, that lots of the big established companies are thinking we're losing touch, so we need to trust younger people? Do you think that was part of that or not?
Yeah, because everywhere, remember, Harrods is only a stone's throw to King's Road, and King's Road was a centre of the
And you've got
60s.
Granny Takes a Trip and
all of that, and
crazy
right
places
along
like that.
King's Road, the shops were changing from vegetable shops and bread shops and whatever, literally all into clothes shops, as they are all now. So yeah, there definitely was a kind
So there might have been a bit feeling out of touch, and we need younger people to connect to younger people.
And also,
perhaps.
younger people were given more opportunity. They really were. There's a kind of fear of younger people not being able to do things now. There's a kind of reticence about trusting young people to do things. But Peter Mayle particularly was fantastic at this. He gave us, all of us, the chance to work our tots off from literally 8:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock every day, apart from Sundays. Always in on Saturday. And we'd be writing and writing and writing, but we'd all enjoy it, and we'd get into the language of it all. And we borrowed all the time from America. I mean, when the new annual came out from the States, when the new
New York Art Directors Club.
New York Art Directors, we would go round the pub, and then all of us, we'd put it on the table in a pub, and then we'd all turn the pages slowly and read it, all of us. Look at that, and who did that, and we were kind of like, it wasn't a matter of obsession, it was about being really, really mad about what you did and trying to learn all the time.
But I guess also then, obviously without an internet, you've only got one of those days or two of those days a year where you could get that hit of good work. Obviously now anybody can look at it any second of the day.
Because I used to go down to the bookshops in St Martin's Lane, and I there's one bookshop that used to carry a magazine called Art Direction.
Oh yeah.
And in this magazine, and we used to get it into PKL, but there would be copies only owned by one of the American art directors that would come in periodically. But then I found out that by accident, that it was in the basement, and I used to go in, fiddle all the way bottom, and then pull out the latest edition of Art Direction, and in there you would see different. They used to do themes, so they do
I've seen that. Black top or something. It would be all the black top.
Exactly that one. I remember that one vividly. There was a Renault ad, there was a somebody else ad, and whatever. Yeah. So I learned from that, and then I would look at all the names and study all the people that would turn up doing all the great ads and know them. And so before I got to PKL, I was already, when I first started writing, I was already pinning ads and things like that on the wall, and they were all the good ads. I look back now and I said, how did I know that they were the good ads when I was just up from production?
How do you think that is? Because lots of people say similar things. They would all pull out similar, Volkswagen, Avis, before knowing that they're big award-winning campaigns. Just they were the appealing ads.
Yeah, I think it's to do with the innate talent. I mean, if you want to call it talent, or let's say it's innate quality. When I was younger, and my sister went to live in Rome, so she was like 16, 17, so I'm 2 years younger than her. My brother went to Canada. I used to write letters to them, and they kept those letters, and they tell me about them. I can't even remember them, but I used to write them. So what was I doing writing letters anyway to my brother and sister? But they used to say they were hysterical letters. They would keep them. They would go off in descriptions about all kinds of different things. And plainly, there's something in me that likes words and the use of them and the whatever. And that's, I think, what attracted me to these specific ads from Doyle Dane mainly. I think it's something inherent. It's language and use of it.
So, I mean, interestingly, one of the ads that I found that you'd done at PKL, which is interesting when we're talking about understanding the sort of vibe and capturing it, had two tramps at the top of Primrose Hill. So what? That just sounds insane now that you could do that. Why? That won awards, didn't it? That was an award-winning, famous ad at the time. So what were you doing putting tramps in a Harrods ad?
What happened was they gave us the brief. Peter gave us a brief and said, they want to open on all-day Saturdays. So we gave a brief. So David Ashford and I were working together. And so the first thing David said, let's go down to Brighton to do the work, right? And I'm thinking...
To think up the ideas.
Yeah, if you like. So that kind of stuff was around and about. The way that people would say, I need to go to somewhere to do something. And to me, I'm just thinking, I just need to settle in a quiet room and write with somebody. Anyway, off we went, and we chatted away, didn't do much work, but we came up with a number of these little 7-second spots. So one of them was about some people in a jungle, a tribe in a jungle, and they could hear drums, dum 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 dum, like that. They said, what's that? He said, Harrods is open all day Saturday. It was that kind of crazy. Another one was a strangely like an ad that David Abbott wrote and said, the board no longer likes you because of the colour of your eyes. Yeah. And I wrote something like the board, it was a green man, just said the board have decided that we're not going to be open we're going to be open all day Saturdays now. I don't know why. Something like very straight. What I most remember was not the fact that the tramps were there, because I wrote the tramps one. I just did it. It was like one of those things. You just say, okay, who was the most likely one to be most unlikely to be interested in the idea that Harrods would, so make a sort of reverse thing. And that was the tramps. There was a guy called Tom Busman who was the director, and I remember they were shooting outside our office, and I'd written these ads. David Ashwell had not written any of them, to my knowledge. Yeah. He worked with me, and he wasn't a writer. So I'd written them, and when I went down to look at the shooting, sort of like, they're shooting over there. Didn't say, you come, you wrote, nothing like that. I came as an afterthought, and I looked down there, and I was like, pushed out the way while other people were getting towards seeing what was going on. And I remember thinking, that's how it is it? It's just like something to do with the hierarchy. Yeah. So I didn't even go to the shoot for the tramps. I mean, I wrote it, but I didn't go to it. And then it put out there, and everyone loved it, because it was sort of, when it turned up, it was kind of odd, and it was a nice little 7-second ad, which I liked.
I wondered whether it was one of those things that if you're Harrods or Harvey Nicholls, you can have an ad with Sid James or something lowbrow, and it's quite cool because you can be lowbrow like that with tramps potentially. Whereas if you're sort of Sainsbury's and you do an ad with tramps, and it just seems ridiculous. But if you're so up there, somehow that's cool to use such.
Yeah,
sort of,
I think it was.
I don't know.
It was the way it was done, though. I mean, give it to the director. He did sort of pass it off. Just I said, I see. I see Harrods is open all day Saturdays, and he just says, yeah, like thoughtfully, like the way tramps are supposed to be philosophical. You know, that's how it worked.
Are they still called tramps? It feels like a term that isn't used anymore. That will get people
They're
writing
called
in.
homeless people.
Homeless people. That's what I meant to say. Not tramps. So, the next thing I remember you handling, which was sort of, I don't know how long after Harrods, was Harvey Nicholls, which was again another premium thing. So, how did you come to get that? Was that just a straight pitch, and you handled that for quite a long time?
No. For some reason, Ron Leagas only lasted 3 years in our agency, which I'm not going to go into. But he knew someone who knew someone, and he'd heard that Harvey Nicholls wanted to do some advertising, and he knew obviously that I'd written Harrods advertising when I was at PKL.
Yeah.
So my journey to starting an agency was PKL, then BMP, then PKL was reversed into BBDO, then I went back to PKL BBDO as it was BBDO, and then from BBDO I started an agency. So by the time we started an agency, we still had Harrods, and I was working on the Harrods account at BBDO.
Oh, were you? So
yeah, we still kept it.
What, late 70s?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't realise you worked on it. So there wasn't much of a gap between Harrods and Harvey Nicholls then?
A bit. I remember we did a series of posters which I really liked. Again, the art director at the time, I won't mention him, it was Sunday. I'd gone over to his place, and he'd had lunch, his girlfriend made lunch, we sat there. He was fast asleep, and we had to do the campaign by the next day. So I wrote these posters, bus sides, and it just says, does your butcher sell 100 pianos or something like that? And it was just basically saying, you know, does your...
And that's for Harrods, obviously.
Yeah, that was for Harrods, yeah.
So that was BBDO?
Yeah.
Okay, I've not seen those. So what was the difference? So having gone from Harrods to then handling Harvey Nicholls, how did you calibrate the change? Was there much change, or did you think it was mainly the way it feels and looks?
It felt a different time. It was the 80s, and I remember the first thing we did was a sale, and it was like, you drop the names, we'll drop the prices, was what the line that I did first for Harvey Nicholls, with then just all the things. It was just a proper sale ad, but done typographically very tidily, you know. And so everything was made into advertising in a way, but it wasn't conceptually, like, again, it wasn't trying to do fashion ads, it was a store ad. Yeah. So had ideas that you could do. So, for instance, we would do things on a new range of tennis wear that would come in, or something like that, and then we'd make a gag about the All England Club, blah, 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 and do things like that. So it allowed us, and we had a fantastic client who eventually moved to Harrods, and that's when we moved to Harrods. So that everybody from Harvey Nicholls, when Mohammed bought Harrods, everybody moved up the road to Harrods. So
he just poached the whole department?
Poached the whole lot. Head of fashion, head of comms, head of PR, head of this, head of that, all down the road.
So what was the gap between you handling Harvey Nicholls and then Harrods?
I'm trying to think.
Was it like months or a couple of years, or?
It could have been months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because obviously you did certainly award-wise, Harvey Nicholls was a big award winner, wasn't it, at the time?
I think so. I don't look back and think it won a lot of awards. I mean, it was noticeable. It was noticed.
We'll feature some of those. And so why switch? Or
because Mohammed took everybody and they said, will you come and do a sale campaign for us? That's the first thing they said to us. We need to do the Harrods sale. It's a big thing. The Harrods sale was like, and still is, maybe not so much now, but then was a huge part of their income, like about a third. Right. But the sheer volume would go in, and the prices were still quite high because they were very, very. Harrods prices came down a bit, so their prices were sort of the same as everybody else's in the sale. So it wasn't really a sale by any standards; it was just Harrods sale.
And obviously that campaign, there's only one Harrods, there's only one sale. Ran for what, 10 years?
No.
Or what? I mean, it's still going, arguably, because it pops up there. But in terms of you overseeing it,
they still use the thing. There's only one sale.
Yeah.
And then we ran it for 14 years.
Right.
Within the agency. So.
And that was the first brief.
Yeah.
And so, what, if you can remember, what went in? What was the thinking that went into that?
It was. I remember it really well because Steve and I were sort of trying to get to what it meant to be this special sale, because they kept saying remember they used to have stars that opened a sale.
Yeah.
And I think they may have I think they did that even before Mohammed, but he made it bigger. They certainly had queues, and they'd have a countdown and things like that, and then everyone would rush famously went into the cutlery department, or the cups and saucer department, and grab at things. So it made the news every time. So it was a big thing. It wasn't just a sale of a department store. It was more than that, and that just gave rise to the thought. So if you think about it being a cultural event almost, it would easily get to the line, there's only one sale, and then we added to it, there's only one Harrods, there's only one sale.
I suppose it's a bit like, to me, I can imagine you get to the line, but I think a lot of people would overdress it or overdo it, or think that could be one line, we'll have some other lines. But to stick with it was obviously the power of it. It's a bit like Patek, because I worked on worked on the pitch, and it's one of the few things I've kept barely any work. I thought that's all right, quite like it. Yeah. But in sticking with it, it sort of grows in power every year.
That's the issue.
Whereas initially, I did a few ads with Peggy Sorotan and whatever, but it's now, I think, to somehow recognise that thing and say, we're going to stick with that, we're not going to keep reinventing it and going around the bushes. That's it, we're going to stick with that. And it's interesting, Ali, you were saying a client come to you and said, we want you to be our agency for the next 10 years. Obviously that aspect...
Patek said the same thing.
Initially in the pitch.
Yeah.
But that is unusual then. It's even more unusual. Nobody sticks with one theme for that long. And yet with Patek, most people would sort of recognise and use that as a sort of benchmark or a reference to say, we want one of those things.
Yeah.
But somehow people don't stick.
And
Often they don't stick because what they've got isn't very good. I don't know how you decide
I think a number of things contribute to that. And I think if you go back to the Harrods as an example, what contributed to the longevity of the Harrods campaign was the fact that the people that we went down the road from Harvey Nicholls to Harrods with, by and large, stayed there, not least Mohammed himself. So Mohammed, who hired us, he was still there. And the only reason we stopped working for Harrods is because I fell out with Mohammed. I was on the board of Fulham. I disagreed with what he was doing at Fulham, and then we fell out. And therefore, on that day, we lost the Harrods account as well. So I was asked to resign from the board of Fulham and asked to resign from the Harrods account. I said, fine. So that was the reason. Otherwise, we would have still been working on it with him. However, and I've lots of good things to say about him, by the way. He's a mischievous guy, but there are good things. But longevity of people is really important. And if you go back to Patek, it's a family-owned company. It's a very small group of people within the what I would call the commercial department, and they've stayed by and large the same all the way through. They had at the very beginning there was a so-called marketing person went in there, who lasted a few years, but that ultimately was dispensed with, and that small team has been the people that have said, okay, why is it working? Is it still working? Keep constantly asking questions, but at the same time seeing the strength in the idea, and the only need was to make it contemporary, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that the thought itself grew in strength, as you said. The more you showed it to people, the stronger it became.
So how many marketing directors have you had on Patek, for example, in that period? What have you had it 20? It must be 20 years. I worked in it.
What was called a marketing director,
years.
or pure marketing director?
I suppose the person in charge of the marketing or advertising. Two. In 25 years.
Yeah.
Amazing. And what about...
One lasted for 7 years, and in between, and then there was no marketing director. There was a commercial director, which is not the same, but because he was across, and still is across everything, in commercial terms.
Right.
One of which is communication, both PR and advertising and product information, if you like. And that's his remit, if you like, and other things which I don't know about. And then more recently, we've had a marketing director who's come in the last year and a half from the watch industry, has come in to help out.
So there's a couple of questions that come off that for me, which is, let's say with Harrods and Patek, At what point do you think? So there's only one Harrods, there's only one sale. Do you think when you do that, yep, we should do that for 10 years, or do you think that's fine for this year, and then you sort of assess it as you go, or do you think that should be a long-term platform?
I always think in terms of 3 to 5 years for things. I've always believed that you should. There is nothing really that sticks after a year or two, or whatever the budget, whatever. You should recognise that people, if it's good, it can last and it can be refreshed and it'll become part of something. People talk about popular culture and advertising being in it, and it is. But in order for it to be in popular culture, it's got to be around long enough. It's got to be within it. So even a film that we love and that's in popular culture, whether it's Ghostbusters, Casablanca, Raiders of the Lost Ark, these are in popular culture. But look how long they last, and look how often they come back. They're not firework displays. That's what I say to people. We can give you a firework display, but that's what it is, and then it goes down, and then you've got to start again. So there's no investment return if you don't see it in 3 to 5 years as an arc, and then assess it and see whether it can go on. Most really good ideas are deep enough. Think of the money that Volkswagen or Avis would have made if they'd stuck where they were. Just think the untold amounts of money that they would have made off those two campaigns that were done in the 60s.
But that's not a popular view, is it?
No, but
most people. So I'm not saying it should be, but well, people are forever changing. You know, I remember when the internet started to become a big thing. There was a feeling that campaigns are gone. We're now just going to throw out ads almost on a daily basis. We don't need campaigns anymore. And obviously that's proved to be ludicrous. But that was the sort of, for a while, that was the sort of vibe. How do you sell to companies the idea of a 5-10 year campaign when the marketing director, I don't know what it is now, 18 months longevity. Mm-hmm. The new one wants to, a bit like in Hollywood, kill whatever came before in case it's too successful and they don't get the credit. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons that makes that hard to do. So how do you?
I think what you do. That? I think what you do is recognise that there's an ideal, the way that advertising works, and if you see it as, I often think of it as in terms of it's our job to build relationships. You don't build relationships and then drop them. I stop what you're doing. You build a relationship on one pretext, and then all of a sudden you stop it because there's a new market director comes in and says, I want to leave my stamp on this company. I want to be known for what I did, not what my predecessor did. If you're very CV obsessed, if you're very self-obsessed, frankly, and you see yourself as being, as moving ahead in your career and being known for things, and for the management to see you as being someone, he did this, it's very unlikely that a management will say to a marketing director, he was great, he did what the other guy did and left it in place. That's not a big achievement for a lot of people in their own whatever. And I understand that. But the devastation it wreaks in marketing and in budgets and in companies is almost, you can hardly count it, because almost every brand has a new marketing director. As you said, every 18 months is the average. That person's got to come and make his mark, and. So if you then look at the advertising relationship, the one that we want with brands, which is long-term, constant, not chopping and changing, it's what it is, and why all our brands from our childhoods, the ones that are carefully stewarded, we still revere them and still can go back to them and think warmly of them, even if we don't even use them. Yeah. If you take that as the norm and say that's how brands work, and God knows enough books are written about it, but that doesn't mean anything to the person that wants to simply make his mark. No. So you've got this conflict. And so if we go into a company with an idea and we say this idea will last 3, 5, we look at it 3, 5, 7, 10 years, they say, yeah, fine. And the people in the room may well agree with you. But in real life, what happens is that those people move on after 2 years. Someone comes in and change it. The clever ones, the good ones, the ones that really do care about the brand they work on, they let things be objectively assessed, and then if it's got any chance of keeping with that equity, they stay with it. And modernise by all means, but they stay with it. I
would imagine I can remember once when I was
working for you in Leagas Delaney, Tom Carty came round and used to have all the ads up the stairs. And there was all the Harrods ads up the stairs. And he stood there and looked at him and went, "Is anyone Sal? Is anyone Harrods? Is anyone Sal? Is anyone fucking ad?" You know, because they're all the same. And it just makes me wonder if that was the case now. So that campaign ran for 10 years?
14.
14 years.
In that shape, yeah.
I would imagine that a client would think, well, the line's not changing. We'll do the production.
Yeah, but...
And obviously what they miss, I mean, because arguably they're doing that themselves now.
Yeah.
And it's appalling.
Yeah.
So they use a similar font that's just a bit cheesy.
Yeah.
It's badly arranged.
Yeah.
They don't have good pictures.
No.
They don't go to Daniel Joanneau because obviously they're just a pain. They're expensive, and Daniel Joanneau has probably got his own ideas on what the. So you cut all of that out, and what you have is nothing. Which is why you need someone. It's why it's worth paying someone to say you should stick with this. It's worth paying for Daniel Joanneau. You shouldn't have that. We've done it. You should have that. You know, you're still steering it. It's not as easy to replicate year on year as many clients would imagine.
They've got to trust you. I mean, in the end, if you look at long-term, we have long-term relationships with our clients. We have, Patek is 25 years, Pictet is 18 years, MSC is 12 years. We work for Nationwide for 24 years. So these are relationships of trust based on the fact that we respect the original set of people that appointed us. We've never let people down. We're straight about things. We know our job is to be counsellors and guides. They ask us questions about things outside their normal advertising remit because they think we're intelligent and we're thinking about the brand. So they only ask us questions about outside advertising and outside marketing because they know that we've got an opinion that will help the brand. And that applies to all of those brands I've talked about. And we don't set out to foster these relationships. They happen because we're the kind of people we are. And I think it is interesting that I mean, Pictet have run the same ads for 18 years. And they are the same ads with the same form, and they were written for the presentation, and they still run. And we're doing more film now, obviously, because you've got requirement for digital and whatever. But we're still doing ads with the same structure, and we still do posters in Geneva and Zurich and Lausanne airports and all that sort of stuff, and in China. So those things are there because people think they work, people like them. We understand the sensibility of the company, the family companies, those three companies, MSC, Patek, and Pictet. So all of that gives you permission to have a relationship. They value the relationship. Inside FMCG companies, there are relationships, but then short-term relationships, and they're often quite glib relationships. They're transactional. You give me an idea, and I'll get on. And you know, it's. I'm not being too cynical about it, but I think that those people move on. You know, and increasingly, clients want projects with their agency, not relationships with their agency. They just want to give a project to an agency, and they'll pitch it. 5 people will do it. You'll do a thing. It'll work. Thank you. No, they won't give you another project.
So, do you avoid projects?
You can't avoid projects. It's a bit like it's only really what's always happened in design. Design has always been project led. It's agencies that have stewardship relationships, which are much more the longer how you build brands. If you take what Thompson's did when we were young, and they had a brand like Oxo and all the stuff they did over years, which they turned this little cube of beef stock into a national hero. And that was years and years of stewardship, different families, different jokes, different this, different warmth, nothing great, but really fundamental to a kind of Sunday roast.
Yeah,
and that was this little cube.
So, in terms of, I mean, as we mentioned, Daniel Joanneau. So, what was the thinking of getting him, and what do you think he brought to it?
The thinking was Steve Dunn and his sort of constant squirreling of influences. He was always looking at for different ways of shooting things. Funny, just amazing, acquisitive mind, and ripping things out of Italian Vogue and sticking them in his drawer, and just visibly hoarding influences and good practice and good type and good photography and whatever. And between Steve and then Sarah, who was the art buyer at the time, Sarah Smith, they came and said, "There's this guy Daniel Journeau," and I knew a bit about him because of Paris Vogue would be in the agency and we'd look at these shots, and we said, "What a great idea!" And then I think between Steve and Daniel, they worked out this idea of making it. We knew what we wanted, which was to photograph the plain stuff, like the glasses, the pots and pans, the knives and forks, to say even these, and make the ordinary things look fabulous. And that's why you could say it was a sale. That's why everything went up. It was the best thing about that campaign was that it enhanced Harrods. Can you imagine a sale ad enhancing a brand for retail? Never happened before. But this actually put Harrods up, not down. And Danielle worked on the first things with Steve, and was wrapping things in brown paper and string and things like that, and fantastic, just beautiful.
I think he brings. I mean, obviously he's an amazing photographer, but what you were saying earlier about letting people in, they're not, in a way, they look absolutely amazing, but they're not very formal. There's like crinkled paper that's peeling to one side. There's bits of string that come off, and yet they're sort of perfect looking pictures, but they're very relaxed.
Yeah,
in a way. And the combination of that and the words, the very stark words, seems great. I mean, presumably that he must have been a fortune to get.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Was he not?
Beyond no. He was just remember, he was a good photographer, but he wasn't like sort of one of the greats. He wasn't like Irving Penn or at that level, that New York level. He was in France, and he was. We took the stuff over there, and Steve took it over there, or Sarah took it stuff over there, and he chewed it and just get on with it. Very quiet, lovely guy. And I mean, I think you're right. He made it accessible, but he also made it very Harrods. It was very, very upscale because it looked so beautiful. So when you saw pots and pans or the cups.
Yeah, it's a combination between very expensive looking, but very relaxed.
What I love as well, one of my all-time favourites I did, the work that Steve and I did, was the film that went with it.
With the slow dissolves.
With the Thomas Tallis music.
Yeah.
Oh, my word.
And what about the tone of voice? So it used to say commences January the 3rd. Obviously, commences is doing a lot of work to put it at a certain letter. It's not a word that comes up regularly. And now it probably says opens or starts.
Yeah.
So things like that were obviously carefully chosen and woven in, and they don't use those anymore. They say enjoy. I looked before we started. It says enjoy a 50% discount, which doesn't seem to have the same class.
But
enjoy that discount.
The point is that what I was as a writer, and Steve knew it as well because Steve is a fantastic writer. We both knew that we had to have this rather cod archness to the way we wrote. That's what it was. It was a kind of archness.
Why do you say cod?
Well, only because it was deliberately. Yeah, look at those shots. Look, oh my word, look at that one.
It's perfect for audio. Someone pointing at a screen with nice shots on.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just flicking through them now. But you can see the sort of scruffy elements in each, like scruffed up paper.
And that's Danielle. Look at that.
Bits and pieces that have fallen on the floor.
Plates in funny brown
funny
tape.
angles.
Yeah.
There's a bit of string on top. It's not very formal.
Boxes,
some of the bits of stuff falling out. It looks sort of scruffy but perfect. But obviously your buying is sensibility.
But it's so upmarket.
Well, it is, but it's a certain type of upmarket. I think most people think upmarket is perfection and you retouch it to death and it's...
I know, but you know what's interesting? You look. Of course they should run that now.
Yeah.
You know, but you know why they wouldn't? We went to see them about 2 years ago. And we had views about this, that, and the other, but not big. It's owned now by the one of the state wealth funds in the Middle East. Very charming people, but we saw English people. You know, that's a Peter shop, by the way.
It's lovely.
And they were charming people, and they said, "Great, really interesting. Thank you." That I've never heard from them again. It's when you get new people in, they don't want to know about people that have done things that have been very successful.
Yeah, I had a meeting with them at DHM. We went in and saw them. We were on a list and talked about some of the detail. I tried to track down the font, funnily enough, because I thought it just looks so. It's amazing the difference in font to me. It just looks so cheesy.
Yeah, exactly.
As it is now, although it's probably got the same name, Baskerville, but. And some of the detail and Daniel Journeau and whatever, that wasn't anything they were interested in.
They weren't interested, were they? No.
So these are all the...
This is now.
now.
Oh, my word.
So it's the same line.
Yeah.
There is only one sale, and there's a picture of a boot, a bland picture. It looks like it could be a Wellington boot. It's nothing. Enjoy up to 50% off. I mean, that obviously could be for...
Ridiculous.
I'm trying to think who that could be. Woolworths, if that's still going. So it's funny. It's all the same parts in a sense, but it feels like down market rather than up market.
Completely down market. It's completely down market. That could
there's
be,
only one.
That could be
sale.
TK Maxx. Yeah.
TK Maxx is probably a better descriptor. So,
but what it is, there is no. One of the things about luxury, and one of the things about premiumisation, going back to that, is that, and why you're right to ask the question is, who knows about how to do it? The answer is everybody, because they all think they know how to be upmarket. They all think they've got an opinion about something like being upmarket, because who's allowed to say they don't know about being upmarket?
Yeah.
So everyone says, I know about this. I've been in a room where someone said recently, oh, I can do that. I'm known as Mr. Luxury.
Yeah.
This guy, right? And so everyone says, I know how to do this. It's easy. You've just got to be snooty, or you've just got to be very bold, or you've got to be this. It's like fashion. Everyone's got an opinion in fashion. That's why it's an impossible industry. You know, to go in there with any kind of common sense is not the way to play fashion. You've just got to go in there and play the game of being, boisterous, enthusiastic about yourself, tons of opinions, and see whether you get found out.
Yeah.
But strategy is the important thing. Strategy is always missing from luxury, I think. Invariably missing, let's put it that way. And you go back to the things that we do, we're a strategy-first agency. So all the things we do are based on a strategy, not based on pink is a new colour, or this, or this typeface, or that typeface. It's not about... The reason that Steve chose that typeface is because he deliberately wanted it to be classical. He believed that Harrods had to be classical, and then the words could be cheekier because the type was more classical. So he balanced it.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So how much would the font affect what you write, do you think? Because we mentioned earlier that I can think of two examples where a writer has felt mortified that the wrong font has been used. One was David Abbott, talking about Lufthansa, the way it was more the layout probably, but that had killed his ads. And I remember you saying about Optima furiously, 25 years previously, that some art director had used Optima and absolutely ruined your ads, but you were probably still red in the face 25 years later. So when something like that is arranged, Steve chooses Baskerville, and you see sort of the first setting, how does that, do you feel that's right, that's wrong? Does that affect the kind of words you use? How does that factor in?
For Steve Dunn and myself, it was everything to do with the way that we created the campaign, because if we started writing together, which we did, and then Steve would go away sometimes and then come back and say, like this, and he'd show something, and it would be so immaculate, and so he would be so clever at getting to the nub of what we both had been thinking about. It was almost, without saying it, he would know what we both wanted for the brand, and it was almost unerring, and he could do it like 3 times a day. If we said it, even if we wrote a poster, just one poster for something, and he'd come back, what, like that, hold it like that in front of me, and say, that was it, just like that. He would have just. So the type and the picture and the composition and this, that, and the other. Even though we didn't have Max at that time, but you'd have a piece of rough artwork to show or something like that, and you think, wow, it would just come so easily to him.
Because the ads that I like are the ones that sound the most upmarket, and they seem so perfect in that setting. So for his nibs, I can't remember the exact words, but it's something like in a momentary lapse of.
Yes, Harrods invites you to come on down.
Momentary lapse of, what would it be?
In a momentary lapse, I think.
In a momentary lapse, Harrods invites you to come on down. Yeah. So somehow seeing that in a very formal setting is works perfectly, the combination of those things.
Yeah, but Steve also knew that we had a wide range of things to do. We had to do a sale campaign, which is where it started with that typeface. We had to do little, what were called then 20 doubles.
Yeah.
Hundreds of those we made, but with the same beautiful typeface, and the leading was correct, and everything about it worked well with the little drawings, and all of these things were hard-working little ads, which we loved doing, and we did them, but at times we were only two teams, ourselves and the Marshall brothers, both of us very prodigious,
Yeah.
But whatever happened, it all looked as one thing.
Well, it all glued together, didn't it? From
Yeah.
the small ads to the big sale ads to the film.
Yeah.
The font really was pulling everything together, wasn't
And
it?
I've often said to people, whether it's upscale communication or not, one of the ways to make, outside of all the guidelines that they do now for everything, just choose a font.
Yeah.
Just choose a font that you can live with, like Mobil. We worked for Mobil Oil
Yeah.
for about 3 or 4 years, and they had that wonderful font all the way back from Doyle Dane, who gave it to them, and then we did ads rather like the Doyle Dane ones.
Yeah.
But the font made it a Mobil ad.
Yeah.
It was always a Mobil ad when you looked at it. Wow, that was it.
So how did you manage handing that tone of voice on to the other teams? Because my memory is that the young teams would have to sort of earn their DPSs by doing thousands of small space ads. So how did you, if you've got a young Rob and Dave, let's give it to, how do you try and get them to understand the tone of voice and write that tone of voice?
I think,
Or is that you crossing things out, putting, say, commences instead of starts, do this, do that?
a little bit. I mean, a little bit, but when you're doing it in volume, so people used to come in with a pile of ads. A young team would come in with a pile of ads, and they'd have some small ads to do on the bread department or something like that, and they'd come in with 30 ads, and then we'd just say, no, yes, yes, I do yes, no, and maybe, and most of it was no, and there'd be some maybes and then some yeses, and then they'd say the reason why it is a maybe is because of this, or the reason why it's a yes because of this, and they would learn from a kind of ordeal by fire in some respects, because they'd learn what it is that made something work and what the language was. So, and it wasn't very difficult. And these were intelligent people. The fact that they hadn't gone to Oxford or Cambridge, they were intelligent, and they wanted to learn. Everybody. One of the great things about our business, I don't know whether it's still true, but when we were young, we all desperately wanted to learn. We were all soaking so much stuff up, mainly from Americans, and mainly at that time when I was at PKL. A little bit at Y&R, but mainly at PKL, and then later into we were just studying everything that was good and wanted to emulate it. So, and the best agency probably of all time, which was Collins at that time, was just every room doing everything amazing, and we were all looking at it in admiration, but also learning from it, learning about how to make commercials, learning how to write commercials, learning how to, how to do upmarket advertising. In a sense, you'd learn that from America, but you'd also learn it from your friends up at Collins.
Long copy. I mean, it's interesting with those ads because you don't see with the black and white ads. Obviously, print advertising's changed a lot, and you don't really see ads like that anymore. Do you think they could still work? Because part of me thinks, like the Howard Gossage thing, people read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad. So I'm interested in pens. I'd read his Nibs one because I'm interested in pens, and they've got a lot to say about it. Do you think they could work, or do you just think that's a different time? People aren't. Because they still look beautiful. They still look.
I agree with the Gossage thing, which says because people a lot of times said to me, "Do people read ads?" Years ago, they've said it all my career. Do people read this stuff?
Yeah.
And I always say they'll read it if it's relevant to them and if it's interestingly written. If it respects them, wants to understand them, wants to offer them something, they'll read it. If it's dull and it's not relevant, then they won't read it for more than the first two sentences. They'll say, "Why waste my time?" So, but that's like everything in life. They won't watch, read, listen, do anything which is dull or irrelevant. So you've got to make it the opposite of that. So right now, I read newspapers on my Kindle, and I read them as hard copy. And I'm quite happy to read articles for an hour in the morning. On Sunday morning, I'll replicate what I used to do with the hard copy, but I'll do it on my Kindle. If there's an ad there about something that's of interest to me, I'll read it. If it's not of interest to me, I won't. So an ad can appeal to me for sure, just the same way an article on football can, if I'm nuts about football or politics, which I like. But if someone comes along and says, "Well, what about this?" a brand that I like, and they say, okay, let's talk about this.
Because I would imagine that there must be some stats saying that the average person reads more today than they did 25 years ago.
Yeah, I bet there are.
Because they're reading text, tweets, they're online, they're looking at stuff.
Yeah.
And yet advertising has sort of gone the other way. It's almost like they're scared to say too much because you're not supposed to do that anymore.
But advertising's got a name, hasn't it? And advertising doesn't really exist for a lot of people. They don't call it advertising. They may do if they're pushed, but they just see it as part of the sort of waves that come over them of words and pictures and whatever on a daily basis. It could well be called news, but it's just the stuff that comes towards them. In the same way as saying, well, retailing. I don't go down to the retail stores. I don't go to the retailing in Oxford Street. I go down to Superdrug or Selfridges or whatever it is, the Adidas store. I mean, I'm going down to follow my passions, not to go down to be I'm not in retailing when I go down and do that. I'm the same way as advertising. People are not in advertising as advertising. It's only people give it a bad name. Oh, advertising doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work like this, doesn't it? Forget it.
Yeah.
What do people do? They read a lot. Will they read about products? Yes, and services, yes, and brands, definitely. And there you go.
Well, I suppose
Can they find the information they need somewhere else is a question.
Yeah.
Where do they get to the information fastest?
Yeah. Well, I suppose obviously the problem with print is the decline in numbers, but that aside, I would imagine most people just think, was there anything interested in that paper or not? It could have been an ad, it could have been anything, rather than segment it into, there were the ads, there were the articles, there was this thing.
Exactly. 186,000 people read the hard copy of the Financial Times every day. They are the 186,000 people who are most difficult to get hold of. The high net worth,
186?
Yeah, the high net worth individuals generally, or ultra high net worth individuals. It's a very prestigious title. They trust that title. So anything said in there carries a huge amount of weight. So why wouldn't it be an ad?
Yeah.
And by the way, an ad with long copy can be impressive just because it's sitting there as a visual, first and foremost. If it's call it a scotch or this or that or a shoe. Or it can be doubly impressive if you read through the whole thing and say, wow, that's a good argument, well put. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's got two layers of interest and the ability to impress me. Just turning up on the right-hand side of on page 5 in the FT
being in that
is
company.
still impressive.
So on the Harrods ads, was there any attempts to try and push for something that was a bit more, particularly with the sales stuff? Most things where there's a discount or there's a sale, there's a sort of people trying to make it urgent and high energy and something's happening. And obviously they're very cool, sort of laid back in a way. They're very clear, but they're sort of restrained, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Was there ever any, can't we make the words blue? Can't we have a flash? Can't we do something?
We had one guy that joined Harrods from America. And he'd worked at Doyle Dane, strangely, and he worked also at Bloomingdale's, and he was hired to be the marketing director of Harrods. And he started pushing for us to do ads like they did in New York, which were lots of illustration and very much more retail-y.
Yeah.
And not just for the sale, but for everything. And I said, I don't agree with you. I think what we're doing is the right thing, but if you want to do that, it's fine, but we're not doing it for you. And so he said, come on, if you do it this way, I'll get you more budget. I said, I'm not interested in the budget. I think what we're doing now is special, and I think it's working, and it's already been working for 3 years, and it's established something. The brand, it used to be, it went through a period of being a mess, and then Mohammed bought it, and then since Mohammed's been here, everything's getting in order. It looks how he says to me he wants it, but if you want to do something different, that's why he's hired you, but I'm not doing it. So then the advertising lady, Meg Gilmore, said this is a problem, and then I said, I talked to somebody else in the management, who was an Australian guy who Mohammed had brought in to run the store, a guy called Rob Hampton, and I said, look, I'm just letting you know that we're going to resign this shortly because of this guy. I said, it's fine if you want him. He said, I don't want him. he said, we've hired him, but not to kerfuffle. He said, why don't I? So he put me in touch with Ali, Mohammed's brother. He said, go and see him and tell him what the problem is. I told him what the problem is. Then Ali got together and we had a meeting with Ali and Mohammed, and then we had a meeting with the guy, Terence Schaefer, myself, Meg Gilmore, and to resolve the problem. And so Mohammed said to me, Tim, what don't you like about Terence? And I said, well, I don't like his tie very much. And Mohammed goes, I said, it's a joke, okay? Don't all take it seriously. I said, what Terence wants for the advertising, I don't agree with and I don't believe in. So I couldn't really do it because I wouldn't do it very well. But if you want it, it's fine. I'll step back, I'll step away, you do what you want to do. So Mohammed goes like that and he says, Terence, what do you want? I think we should be much more dynamic and we should do this, and in New York they do things like this, and so Mohammed said, well, Terence, Tim and his team have been working with us for 3 years and we like what they do, and I can say that people in the store like it and other people like it, and it seems to be working and people talk about it, and you've only been here 6 months and you haven't done anything like that for the store. You haven't achieved anything yet. So if I let you change that when you haven't done something, when you've done something, then you can turn around and say, I've done something better than that. But if you haven't done anything, I would be foolish to let that go in order to get what you want.
Yeah.
So why don't you work together, and Meg, who's in charge of advertising, you come and tell me if they're arguing again. And that's the end of the meeting.
And that was it. Excellent.
Yeah.
That was in year 3.
Yeah. And then he was gone in year 4, the advertising guy from New York.
And what role did Mohammed play in that period? Did you deal with him much? Was he?
Yeah.
Did you ever have to show him any ads, or was it just more of a broad?
We didn't show him too many. Occasionally we'd bump into him with something, or something would happen where something went off the rails a bit, or not too much. I think he just liked them. I think he liked what we did, and I think his friends liked them, and I think his immediate circle liked them. I think the buyers liked it because they could see that it gave them a more intelligent sort of sense of what the brand could be. Because there was writing, there was stuff in there. It wasn't just retail. It had a whole personality, and it all came together, as you say, to make one brand. And Mohammed was generally appreciative of it, and occasionally he would say something about a colour, or why was that dressed in blue, or something like that, whatever. But he was very, very immersed in the store.
So, as the last question, if Harrods turned up tomorrow, how would you approach it differently in today's landscape? It's obviously such a different world. Would you revive and update, or would you sort of start with a blank page and?
I think you've got to look at go back to your target audience. Mm-hmm. How do they consume media? What do they want from that media? How much time do they spend with that media? What's your product? And I used to say that Harrods is actually about 300 different businesses, because if you take all the departments, they're all different. They're almost like a different profit center.
Yeah.
And then you've got to work out how best you can characterize the total offer to those people who consume media like this and like this and like this. Now, there may be a number of different target audiences, or different personas, let's call them that. So, for instance, you can have the older people who are, and this is talking about the domestic audience. And remember, Harrods' audience before COVID would be 40% tourism, maybe more, 60, between 40 and 60 tourism. So those people, how do you affect them? We never really ran anything. We did a campaign in New York once, but it only lasted one season. So you've got to do what you do with everything, and look at it in the way the audience looks at it and how they consume media. You have to do that. Would I run the sale campaign on bus sides? Would I go back to what we did before on bus sides all day long?
Because essentially you're still going to need a look that's appropriate, that feels special. You're still going to need a way of talking that feels premium and upmarket. So regardless of what channels you're in, you're still going to need some of those things.
If you take Instagram, what would look better than Daniel Journaux's photographs on Instagram? He would blow everyone away. Everyone thinks they're a photographer until they see Daniel Journaux's photographs, and he can shoot all the things he likes around across the sale, or indeed the furniture department, or whatever you want to do, and just say, everything has to look fabulous, and the structure that we had before allowed us to do that.
Obviously, people don't do that on social. Because it's so cheap to buy. They have proportionate budgets. So most of the stuff you see on social media, they use really poor photography, cheap, cut out little bits of crap.
Yeah.
Obviously reflects badly on the brand, but
they've been told it's cheap. You see, they've been told that social media is cheaper than paper.
That's right.
Because it's owned and earned and this and that and not paid for. They just think, well, why would we spend any money? Why don't we just use found photography to say that point? Well, that doesn't give you a brand. But the
people seeing it are still having an opinion on your company.
Absolutely.
So
and therefore you've got to
they're not thinking, well, this is only cheap media, so that's why they look so trashy.
No, they look at it and say, but they do assess your brand.
Yeah.
And then you say, what? How distinctive are we? And then you say, well, we're not if somebody else is using the same photographs or indeed the same style.
Cool. We're done. You're a free man.